Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Micah Marshall. I'm the Executive Director of Refuge Youth Network, and I'm so excited to jump into this new series with you guys. As we kicked off this year with our students, we decided to dive into a sermon series based on 1st and 2nd Kings. Why, you might ask? Well, everything going on in our world right now, all these new changes in leadership, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about that. Leadership. Everywhere you go right now, people are talking about this, from podcasts to books to other videos to seminars, just all over the place. Leadership, leadership, leadership. We're talking about good leadership. We're talking about bad leadership, who to follow, who not to follow. And I really believe that this would be a great time for us just to capture the culture of the season and talk with our students more about this. And so we have this opportunity to dive into the Word of God to discover all of these things that He has to say about leaders. And the biggest thing is, in the Bible, there's a lot that we can learn from these leaders in 1st and 2nd Kings. There was kings who were godly kings who followed after the will of God. There were kings who were not godly kings who did not follow after the will of God. And what I love about this whole series is that it teaches us so many valuable lessons. Not only that, but we get stories full of drama, power struggles, and lessons that go just beyond leadership to teach us more about following the voice of God. And if you really love kings and queens and prince and princesses, you're gonna love the kingdom stories that are found in this book. And so this one's for you. We're gonna jump into it right now. But before we jump into 1st and 2nd Kings, I wanna ask you, when you think of a great leader, who do you think of? Maybe someone who inspired you, maybe someone that's a politician or an athlete or a CEO. Think about a great leader. Now, take this moment and I want you to think about a bad leader. Think about a leader who totally missed the mark. See, the truth is, we will always remember good leaders and we will always remember bad leaders. It's just something that we always remember. People that have great influence and people that have used their influence in not such a good way. And the thing is we can learn from both of them. Both of them can just really influence us to have a lasting impact, to say, okay, I want to be like this or I don't want to be like this. Now, imagine if you were called to be the next great leader. If you were, maybe you're called to be the next king or queen. Maybe you're called to be the next president of the United States. What's the first type of things you're going to do? What are the laws? What's the leadership capability that you have to do what God has called you to do? Well, what I love about this question is that the Bible actually gives us very strict guidelines and is packed with stories that are able to help us learn to be better leaders. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, whatever you might do, you're probably in some type of leadership capacity, whether you're a captain of a team, whether you're a boss at your job, or whatever it might be. But we're going to jump in 1 Kings chapter 1, and we're going to talk about Solomon. So here's the scene. Let me set it up for you. King David, the great king, the guy that killed the giant lions, bears, he is the legendary warrior king. He's at a point in his age where he's old and he's actually really sick. He's at the end of his reign here in 1 Kings. And so the major question that everyone is talking about is, who's the next king? Who's it going to be? Because always when one king dies, another king takes his place. So who is it going to be? Because in this story, we find that David hasn't officially really even said who the next king's going to be. And that is a major problem. Who's going to lead the nation of Israel? Who's going to be the next one? Well, let's talk about this guy that enters in, Adonai, one of David's sons. See, he got this ambition, and instead of waiting to be asked or waiting to be told by God, he decided, I'm going to be king. He took it upon himself to say, you know what? I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm going to be king. And not only that, I'm going to throw a huge party. I'm going to invite all the right people. And I'm going to declare myself the next righteous ruler of the entire nation. I'm going to be the guy. I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm not going to consult David. I'm not going to consult anybody. I'm not even going to consult God. I am just going to do what I want to do. And so Adonai goes in and he takes this place and this position that was never even created to be his. So you got to understand something in this story. God had already chosen someone to be the king. He already revealed that in a promise. And so we have to go back and look at that. But Adonai didn't care. He just wants power. And let's just be real. If we have an opportunity to get power, to take power, we usually do. And not often do we ask God, hey, what should I do? Or should I take this power? No, we just took it. And, I think about we always wanting to take control rather than just saying, okay, God, what is it that you promised? What is it that you have? So many times we just do what we want to do. Well, as we read in this story, you find Nathan the prophet and Bathsheba, who is Solomon's mother, realize the problem is happening. They hear about the party. They see everybody bowing down to Adonai. They see all these things happening. And they realize that if Adonai takes the throne, there's going to be a huge problem for the kingdom because he was not chosen by God. And so they went to David and said, David, we know that you're sick, we know that you're ill, but we want to remind you of what God told you to do. We want to remind you of the promise that God gave to you, that Solomon would be the next king. So David sought the Lord, and in that he declared again that, Solomon will be the rightful king. I will go and I will fulfill that promise. And he said, you know what? We will make him the king. And it says that the nation celebrated that. Meanwhile, Adonai is probably like, what the heck is going on? His little party's falling apart. People are not following him anymore. People aren't showing up to the party. They're all going to Solomon's thing. And he's just terrified. So what do we take from this story? Well, there's 4 things I want to share with you. Number 1, God chooses leaders, not us. See, Adonai just thought he deserved to be king because of who he was, and he was the oldest, and he was all these different things. But leadership isn't always about the human standards of things. It's not about just because I feel like I have it, I should have that position. It's about God's plan. And maybe you are in a season right now, you don't feel like the obvious choice. But remember this, that if God has called you to something, no man can take that away from you. If God is positioning you somewhere, you're going to be there. It doesn't matter how popular you are or how powerful you are. What is mattering is the purpose that God has for your life. He sees something in you that the world might not see. And I love that because the Bible oftentimes talks about that the world looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. Number 2, when you follow God's plan, it's going to take courage. You got to realize that anytime God asks you to do something, it's going to take an element of courage and faith to get it done. Solomon was stepping into his role. Wasn't easy because Adonai was already there. There's this power struggle going back and forth. Adonai had supporters, and not everyone was behind Solomon. Some people wanted Adonai to be the king. They didn't want Solomon. But Solomon said, you know what? No, I'm going to step into the promise with courage. As soon as Solomon trusted God's plan, things began to change. And when David made the call, when David proclaimed the call on Solomon, Solomon stepped up in courage. Realize that sometimes God is going to call you to things and you have to step out in courage. You might not feel like you're the fit. You might not feel like you're the one, but understand stepping out in courage is what we're called to do. And it's something that we're always going to have to do. And it's not always going to be easy, but it is the right thing to do. Number 3, what we have to realize is that leadership is about serving. Solomon wasn't about himself. He was about the people. He wasn't crowned to be the king so he could serve himself. He was crowned to be the king so he could serve a whole nation. So often in leadership, we believe that it's all about us all the time. And Adonai, that's what he thought. He thought it was all about him being king, him having power, him having fame, him having fortune. Now, that's not how this goes. Leadership in God's kingdom is about serving others, not bossing them around. I want you to think about a moment. I want you to think about Jesus in the Gospels. Every time we see Jesus leading, he's not just leading, he's serving people. That was Jesus' style of leadership, was servanthood. If you want to be a great leader, you got to lead from among, not above. Walk with your people. Don't just bark orders. Walk with them to where they need to be by serving them and who they are. The 4th thing is this, is that really Solomon had to trust in God's word, God's promise, God's sovereignty. When Adonai realized he lost, he panicked, he begged for mercy, he ran away. There's a whole story about him grabbing the horns of the altar and afraid that Solomon was going to kill him, but Solomon didn't. Solomon could have got revenge. He could have just killed him right away, but he didn't. He trusted that God was in control and he offered forgiveness. See, too often we stress over things that we cannot control, but the truth is God's got it. I want you to say that. God's got it. You can trust him. You can believe in him. So let me bring it back to you real quickly as we close this out. I got a couple of questions. Number 1, are you waiting for God's plan or are you forcing your own? Are you waiting for God to do something big or are you trying to make it happen on your own? I'll tell you what, oftentimes when I do things on my own, I mess it up completely. And so are you waiting on God or are you making it happen on your own? Number 2, do you actually have the courage to follow God's will when he asks? Even when it's tough, even when everything around you, every circumstance says no, are you still going to say yes? And the last thing is this, are you using your influence to serve others? As Christians, as leaders, we are called to serve others. God has given us influence. He's given us favor with man. We need to be able to use that correctly. See, the story in 1 Kings, Solomon really reminds us that God's plans are always bigger than ours. And man will try to get involved and step into their own plan, but God's plan will always prevail. God's plan will always be in front. He's calling us to lead with humility and faith and through servanthood. So I hope this blesses you today. I hope that you grabbed all these things. We're going to continue on the series. And listen, if this message spoke to your heart, do me a favor. Like this, comment on it, subscribe to it, whatever you might do, share it with someone, and let's just keep growing together. Let's keep growing as God has called us to be. We'll see you soon, and just continually tune in to hear the voice of God. God bless.